Welcome to another show of the Research to Reps Roundtable. I am your co-host, Dr. Coach Pat Ivy, and with me is Dr. Ted Lambrinides. Ted, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Pat. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, fantastic. Dr. Ernie Reimer, what's going on?
Today's my birthday. I'm excited to be
Oh,
here today, and I'm excited to introduce everyone to David Boyle. I met him a few weeks ago when I was on the Gold Coast for the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association's International Conference on Applied Strength and Conditioning. I listened to David's presentation, and as soon as it was over, I was already texting Pat and Ted, letting them know that he had to be on the podcast. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, gentlemen. Very excited about being on the podcast and sharing some information and exchanging ideas and talking about strength and conditioning and high performance. And I love America. I've been over there, around 26 times. So certainly learned a lot of things over there and visited a lot of places and drank a lot of beers.
Absolutely.
So, Ernie, you were in Australia not too long ago. Can you tell us about that experience? And we'll have what we want David to kind of validate that.
Well, first of all, it was an awesome time, and hats off to the hospitality of the ASCA and their collaboration with the CSCCA. They really rolled out the red carpet for all of the speakers. And I think the United States and our conferences here have a lot to learn on how to show hospitality for their guests at conferences as well as the speakers. So I was blown away by that. And then my wife came out and we spent a week. I would say there was a lot of highlights of the trips, but maybe the most novel or the unexpected highlight was Tambourine Mountain, the rainforest there. Had no idea that was just about 45 minutes inland, and we spent a whole day there, and it was amazing. We had a great time.
So what would you say was your highlight of your trip? And your wife's not listening, so you don't have to worry about any bias.
Well, we definitely closed down the hotel's pub until, we were probably there until 2 or 3 in the morning. I think they made last call at 11, but they somehow kept serving until 2 or 3 in the morning. Thankfully, I think everyone on the show who knows me knows that I don't actually drink alcohol. So thanks to you for feeding me non-alcoholic beers the whole time. Appreciate that. It allowed me to stay social and hang in there with everyone. Maybe a highlight was at 2 in the morning when all of the young professionals were trying to take selfies with Martin. That was a highlight.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. It was our first conference since COVID hit, so we had good numbers, and we trialed just having it over 2 days. So because Sundays are write-off normally with everybody out till 3 a.m. in the morning. So yeah, it was quite successful, and we had our highest delegate numbers. So yeah, it was great. And the Gold Coast it's like Vegas with the beach there. It's a great place to have a conference.
so David, in terms of giving our listeners a little bit about your background and the evolution of how you are doing today, what was the progression? And along that progression, what do you think were the key learning experience of some of the different responsibilities that you've had?
Ted, it's been an interesting career for me. I was a late developer, and I guess my gift was I was fit and I could take a hiding, and I didn't want to let my friends down. So I got an opportunity to play the National Rugby League competition, and I was winning all the runs. At those days, we were doing 14K time trials, and when you're 15 stone and running distances and come home first, you get noticed. And then I worked hard and got lucky. So Craig Bellamy, one of our coaches, I had a mate that was up there that was a very talented player, and I kind of got a contract as a driver for him. And then it just all fell into place, and I played with the South Sydney Rabbitohs for 10 years professionally, got to play State of Origin, and then embarked on a coaching career. I started doing marketing and health programs, and did an MBA. I also was an electronics technician at a steel factory. When I was playing, we went full-time professional then, and I started a corporate health company as well. So it was kind of pretty interesting there. And then I decided that I wasn't interested in the corporate health because they weren't motivated, and I wanted to get into high performance sport. So then I started working with different clubs. So I've had 7 NRL clubs I've worked for. Most of the time I've left on my own grounds, and then the last couple I just didn't, for the coaching reasons and that. So I had a good sound base of clubs there, and also learnt not to burn bridges. And I also worked with an NBL team, a basketball team, the Wollongong Hawks. So that was a pretty, it didn't help my marriage, first marriage, but it was a great career. And then started doing some lecturing. So it's been really diverse, and now I've just finished a master's in health and medical science. So yeah, it's been a real journey. And before I did the conference in Australia, I was over the UK Strength and Conditioning Association and delivered my findings of my presentation over there. But during the late 80s, I had 7 months over in England playing football over there as well. So it's one of the questions was, for an icebreaker, if you could choose any occupation you could in the world, what would you choose? And then for the last 42 years, I've been doing it. So I've really been blessed, and I continue to learn. And now it's more, I guess, in high performance, it's how to treat athletes with that emotional intelligence is a real key finding of one of my on the studies. But also, you've got to let them know you care. They don't want to know how much we know. They want to know how much we care. It's about them and individualization.
I think that's a universal term, and I think that's pretty positive to for you to share with us. Athletes don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And for you, looking back over your career, you mentioned a few things. You continue to listen and learn, and you talked about your love for what it is that you do. For young professionals out there that want to have this career where they're known as someone who's a really good contributor in the field, what advice do you have for them to make when it comes to making career decisions?
Again, I'll take it back to Craig Bellamy. So he's been coaching one of our NRL teams for the past 20 years. And he said he was brought up working hard and you'll get lucky. And that's what his dad said. And then he's coached this one team that's been very successful, the Melbourne Storm. And you've got to care for your club and you've got to care for your teammates. And I think that comes through with coaching. Part of my thesis was interviewing 14 head coaches and high performance managers, and the good ones do care. And it's not what they say, it's what they do. Everybody wants a team first culture, to develop a team first culture, but not everybody acts that way. And you can look at your objective data, you can look at the subjective data, but also if you look at your observational, you can see after a game, the players that actually hug the coach have that relationship. And it's a kinship relationship, which is very unique because you give an athlete their chance to be their best they possibly can, but you've got to take that away from them. There comes a time when, you know, the curtain comes down on them, and you've got to say, listen, there's no contract next year. So how those coaches, the successful coaches, know how to deal with that, and Bill Belichick and guys like that, like they've just been coming through and keep producing success.
You know, and
I hope that answers your question.
That was a great answer.
your already shared some of your presentation, and the two things that sort of want you to elaborate on was the importance of casual conversation and those conversations in the corridors. Could you expand upon that a little bit?
So 2018 at our conference in Sydney, Mike McGuigan, he's a researcher from New Zealand. He talked about casual conversations. And then, you know, when you're getting all your data for your thesis, I just really looked it up and then noticed that that's honest communication. You call one of your players into your office and they've got preconceived ideas of what's going to happen. And then you go to normal meetings and you hear people just talk for the sake of talking. So the casual conversations are so powerful, not only with your athletes, but other coaches, because a lot of athletes will tell you, Pat, something different to what they tell Ernie or yourself, Ted. So it's all these different interpretations. And again, those cliches, it's not what I write, it's what you read. It's not what I say, it's what you hear. So those interpretations of what we hear are very important. And body language is 55% communication and 37% verbal content. Your tone. So, you know, when we were kids and you knew you were in trouble, you knew you were in trouble before when your parents walked in, just to look on their faces, you were horrified. And these are all things that just very simple principles, but something that really we need to rely on in coaching and forming relationships.
I think your research is super, super interesting. And I just want to comment to the audience that this is the Research to Reps Roundtable. And what we're talking about right now from David's perspective isn't just opinion. This is research that he's done. And it's extraordinary because what he just said is that he interviewed the head coaches, and I'm sure a lot of other staff, which he may tell us more about, but he interviewed the head coaches, 14 different head coaches of the same professional sports league. Now, like, give me an example of anyone who's been able to do 14 interviews with 14 different head coaches of any professional sports league in the United States. And I'm unaware of anything like that that's happened. So this is research, and it's super, super interesting. Would you talk a little bit about how you were able to accomplish that?
Thank you, Ernie. I appreciate that feedback. Well, after working, playing for 10 years and then working at 7 clubs, I certainly come across a lot of coaches. And then as I played, I was very limited with my skills, but as I said, I was tough and I could take a hiding. After I got let go of the last club, I started lecturing, and Trevor Clark, who was the guy that got me a job, someone that I got hit with a swinging arm 30 years ago and become a good mate, said, why don't you do a Masters by Research? So I started doing the Masters by Research, and then I got a call from the NRL referees general manager. And he said, oh, do you want to come work with the referees? And I've ignored him for 42 years. And all of a sudden, now I've been the high performance manager for the referees. That role is, we've got full-time professional referees, and we go to scrimmages, and I look after them on game days, and I might go to 2 or 3 games of the 8 games every weekend, and I go to scrimmages. So there was no bias and no conflict of interest. And because I knew them, or they knew of me, I built up a relationship. So out of something terrible, in the COVID, we were isolated. We were in a bubble, all stuck in Brisbane, 16 clubs in a Brisbane. So I probably couldn't have got the interviews done if I wasn't in the bubble. So, work hard, you get lucky. And I could actually see him face to face and said, do you mind if I interview you on decision making? And then, a couple of the coaches, one incidental was, he'd done it for about 42 years. He said, won't be a very long talk, but yeah, come and see me. And then the honesty that the interviews that I had with them was amazing. It was just full of gratitude from myself. And sometimes I had to turn the recorder off because it became very personal for them, on some of their challenges that not many people know, and what happens at different clubs and the culture and the things they went through. So it was so rich, the data, and very humbling that I was able to do that. So much so that I've approached my supervisor now and to see if I can continue research and hopefully get a PhD by publication. Yeah, so special.
I'm curious to know, like, what about you said there were 16 teams, so share some anecdotes on how you didn't get those other two coaches.
You were there at the Craig Bellamy. So what was good, Craig Bellamy, I'd played at the same time with him. We were the same age, but he was in the backs and I'm in the forwards, getting my head smashed in and making 48 tackles. But when he was saying it, we're fighting as head coaches. We're fighting you get into the top 8 for the playoffs. Then we're fighting you get in the top 4, and then we're fighting you in the top 2. So I'd approached Craig, but he was still fighting to get in the top 8. So he didn't have any time. He was concentrating on trying to get in the top 8. Where I don't think they've ever missed out on the top 8. So so that was some of the reason there. The other thing is that I had to de-identify the coaches. So some of the coaches and the standards that I wanted is that they had to have at least 10 years experience as a head coach or worked in a high performance team. So some of them weren't coaching now, but they were involved in coaching. That's how I got all the numbers up. Some of the coaches said that, yes, I want to interview you. And then because they're going that terrible, the pressure on them is immense. So, and just on that, so out of 16 coaches this season, 25% of them have been let go. They got the sack. And that's an interesting thing, that the pressure that they're under. And one of my further proposals for research is to look at leadership and management. So out of all the coaches, there's only 2 of them that one had an undergraduate degree, a diploma, and the other one had a degree in sports science. So from the 90s, the late 90s, we had 4 in the high performance program, and now the head coach looks after 25 staff. So 25 staff, 35 players, and how many casual conversations do they have with their players every day, and their high performance managers. So not only do they have to have respect and trust and honesty with their players, but they need to choose their staff. They've got to be thinking off the one page, and that's not always there. So I'd go to a few of the games and you look at the culture of the place, and some of the guys were playing, but they're bench players. They weren't even looking at the game. They were talking to other people on the bench. And then you can read it straight away that the culture there just isn't conclusive to a winning formula, which was something that everybody strives to do, but it's hard to control. And then even Craig Bellamy, he spoke also that he was actually a strength and conditioning coach, so a high performance manager. And then he got offered a job with Wayne Bennett, who's one of our longest serving coaches, over 40 years. And Wayne Bennett, we have a state of origin game. So it's when all of state of New South Wales plays Queensland, and it's the highest rating TV show we ever get. But it's mate against mate, state against state, and there's no holds barred. I was fortunate enough to play 4 of them, and I tell you, you would run into a brick wall and you wouldn't care. That's how hyped you get up with it. And actually, we played over in Veterans Stadium in California. There was a 4th state of origin over there. Anyway, Craig was the assistant coach and high performance manager at the Broncos, and there was a short turnaround. So it was a Sunday game to a Friday game, and Wayne Bennett was tied up with the state of origin team. So he said, "Okay, Craig, you're going to take our baby Broncos, because a lot of the players out of the main team were playing state of origin." He said, "And you're going to take them over for the week." So Craig said they didn't even train. We might have trained one day, and we flew down to Sydney to play these guys, and we won. And all of a sudden, the media just said, "Super coach Craig Bellamy." And that was it. That was just lucky, he said, and it's just gone on from there. So, it's just these simple quotes that you get how it turns into, and how simple it is to, and how lucky or fortunate you can be in professional sport as well.
David, from the research you did with the head coaches, what advice would you give strength conditioning coaches that they need to know in dealing with the head coach that some of them may be unaware of, but your research, would bring attention to something they need to know?
In the interviews, it was a semi-structured interview. So it was, what is your leadership style? How do you disperse the objective data interpretations? How do you choose your staff and things like that? So we talked about that, but then we'd elaborate on those casual conversations, and then I'd sort of share from them. So one particular story was the Super Bowl, our grand final. We had a player in 2016 played with a broken shoulder blade, which is totally unheard of. But he'd played with the Storm when he was playing for the Roosters, and he was a halfback, so like a quarterback in NFL. So he was the major general. But because he'd played for the opposition team for so long for the Storm, he knew all their plays, and they were trying to shut him down. But because he was so clever cognitively and knew other players, that he was able to draw attention but get the ball away before he could get hit. It was a major gamble, but they get research on if you could win a gold medal at an Olympics or a Super Bowl, would you hand it in for if you're going to die 10 years younger? And a lot of people said, "I'd rather get the gold medal than worry about death." So that was a major coup for them. So we talked about different things like that, and even especially with our leadership style. So we focus with the ASCA that I'm on the board of. We focus on leadership and management now, because we've got the high performance manager's got anywhere between 12 and 17 staff. So how he treats his staff and that as well, and that emotional intelligence. So I guess one of the key things with my study was the qualitative and the comments from the participants. And one of them was Boyle. We used to give them 3 slaps around the head and 1 cuddle. Now we've got to give them 4 cuddles. And there's societal changes on our athletes. So how much that's changed too. And, and a lot of them feel they've got that entitlement. So it's how we deal with them, and our leadership styles need to be adaptive to our players, and not every player is the same. So that's a lot of the conversations that we offer there, and take it back and put into our level 3 courses that develop that's our elite level of the ASCA. So a master coach, So you've got to have all these prerequisites, but part of the course content is a leadership model and doing personality typing and just understanding their roles more. So that's one of the most powerful things.
David, I want to ask Ernie and Ted a question, but I need some more background information from you before I ask them the question. Your research, it was qualitative or was it mixed methods?
So it was a mixed method. Yeah. So we used the demographics and we presented a pre-interview questionnaire on all the metrics. Like we talk about acute chronic loads and the external loads, and do we put a qualitative component to it? Because there's a lot of controversy over Tim Gabbett's, actually it's Billy Hullen, acute chronic load work ratio, with your working between 1.3 and 0.8 metrics, and week 5 has got to be somewhere between the average of the 4 previous weeks. So that was the quantitative component, and what the research showed was everybody used an acute chronic load ratio. However, they weren't using the same metrics. So the metrics mainly for acute chronic load are associated with running, high-speed medials, total distance, accels, decels, and collisions, whereas a lot of the teams monitored a lot of other wellness areas. So you've got your subjective data, and you've also got your objective data, and they put a quantitative rating on that. So yeah, it's been quite, and since then I've done the Tim Gabbett course, working harder and smarter. So it's been a really interesting journey. And to answer one of your earlier questions, Ted, is yes, I keep learning, and as you guys all know, the more research you do, the more understanding that we don't know as much as we want to know. We just keep going and digging down deeper and deeper. It's crazy.
So thank you for that answer. Because the information that you're sharing is rich. I was wondering how you were getting so much. And so it's mixed methods, which means it's qualitative and quantitative. So now I want to ask Ernie and Ted a question. Why is there not more qualitative and mixed method research done in sport in the United States, or at least in collegiate athletics or professional athletics? Wouldn't it be more?
I'll say,
Go ahead, Ted.
I think certain coaches are hesitant to have any of their data out there, even though a lot of it would be de-identified. There is data out there. I will just say this, is that a lot of times it never gets in the hands of the coaches or the practitioner. You'll see, oh yeah, I didn't know that this school had 5 years of football data, and they did a research. It was in a peer-reviewed research article. So there is. It's just not to the extent that it really should be, that would benefit the health and safety of athletes in a variety of sports in the U.S. I'll let Ernie expand upon that.
Yeah, I think that it probably is there, just not in our traditional like health and performance professions like strength and conditioning and nutrition, etc. If like say take our sports administration department here at U of L, a lot of the research they do is actually qualitative, structured or guided interviews, etc. I think there's a lot of value in it. I know during my PhD, I took some qualitative research methods and I have used some of that. Like one internal study that we did was when I was at the US ski team, and we were the number 1 ranked speed team in the world. And we had a lot of success elsewhere in the women's alpine program. I did an open forum qualitative study among all of the athletes affiliated with that women's ski team, as well as all of the staff, to try to understand the components that contributed to the team being so good on the global scale. So I think there's a lot of value and opportunity for it. It's not heavily taught in a lot of the academic programs we go through. So like I said, I took some qualitative methods, but I actually said that was probably more of just general research methods courses. It wasn't like a full course related to qualitative methods. And so I don't know if we teach it a lot in the undergrad or graduate school setting. And so as we emerge into these professions like strength conditioning, athletic training, sports nutrition, etc., we don't get a lot of that.
I think when people think about, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Sorry, when I was doing I had to do coursework before I started doing the research, and qualitative data is wasn't really recognised to start off with, so it's growing in popularity. But yeah, it was hard to get there. And my supervisor, my principal supervisor, who is American, Sophia Ninfus, professor, she's very much a positivist, and yeah, very, very quantitative. So it was interesting to be able to do that, and I guess that's why it was such a privilege to be able to know the coaches and get access to them. It was pretty special.
And I agree with you there. I think that the qualitative research process is just not that popular in the sports sciences. But if you look in other fields like business, there's a lot of qualitative research and that happens. Like the book Good to Great is it has some quantitative data there because it's looking at the outcomes of businesses who have been on the verge and then suddenly became great businesses. But a lot of what they studied was the characteristics, and that was qualitative in nature. And there's a lot of qualitative research that happens in the business industry. There's a lot of qualitative research that has happened in the social and psychological sciences. I just think it's somewhat of a foreign concept to the sports sciences.
Yeah, and even you guys know too how often I thought about quitting doing the research because it was just hard work, laborious. The interviews, the average was 49 minutes, but there's about 15 pages of transcript, and I had to go through every page because the conversation sometimes it was muffled or I was too far away from it, but just that is the case or that is not the case. Just one word makes a big difference. And then even using the software, this NVivo 12 was learning the software and trying to get the themes and turn them into nodes and different things like that. So I've just so many pages and pages and pages of transcripts and spreadsheets, because I had 13 questions on the pre-interview questionnaire, and then I had 7 open-ended questions in the qualitative, and trying to get all these different themes. And it was rewarding, but challenging too at times, especially when you're holding down a high performance job in sport yourself. That's you've got to be available 24/7. So quite a journey.
So Ernie,
go ahead.
So Ernie, if you were to do some qualitative research with sports scientists, what would be the themes that you would want to do the research on, Ernie?
I'm interested in understanding the role of the sports scientist in the United States sports market or sports industry. It's a lot different than the sports scientist in other systems like Australia. I'm interested in the things that have contributed to successful outcomes in sports science in the actual applied setting versus pitfalls that have occurred. Being someone who is kind of growing up and trying to understand what sports science means to United States sports, I'm pretty in tune to the profession and to the different sports scientists that are here. I probably don't hear as many of the stories as I could because I am a sports scientist, but I know the conversations happen, and I've heard some of it among trusted individuals. And I know that a lot of sports scientists in the United States have been extremely successful, but I also know that a lot have been unsuccessful in our culture, our sports culture. So for me, I would study those components because I think that's going to open up the door to how a sports scientist and a sports science department could truly operate in the North American system, in particular the United States. And that may be how they interact with coaches, other support staff, the athletes, administrators, other stakeholders, etc.
If I can just add to that. So my interviews just weren't with the head coaches, it was high performance managers as well. So sports scientists. But that would be an interesting study to interview the sports scientists, because the sports scientists, the high performance managers, they don't think we've caught up. We take that much objective data, that we're looking at accels, decels, high-speed distances, collisions. We're looking at mid-thigh pulls. We're looking at velocity-based training, trying to get all these things. But let's face it, when we've got elite athletes, they're all outliers. They don't fit into these bell curves. They just change the data. And then, I remember coach the NFL, coach New York Jets, Bill Parcells. So we were talking to him one day. We'd go to different clubs. So I've been to the 49ers, the LA Rams, when they were the LA Rams, or they're back at the LA Rams now. San Diego Chargers, University of Hawaii. We went to all these different places over there. But good Bill Parcells, on the call, we were talking to him, and he said, "You got a phone call, excuse me." So he says, yeah. Can you spell DALENT? If they got that, ring me back. Good teams got to have good players. You can't win without good players. And that's part of it. So, and we haven't caught up with technology. So again, the new breed of players that come out was they want to know everything, but the interpretation of the data is not good. So they look at the data. One particular coach said, Boyle, we took this data and the players that come in, they looked at it. Yeah, I ran 9.5 Ks. I made 20 tackles. I got good high speed meters. I had a great game. He said, wait there. What about the 3 tackles that you missed and the 2 penalties you give away? Also the 3 effort areas that you never tried hard enough. And that's part of it. That's one thing to the players when they look at the data. And the coach says, I don't think they're fit enough. They're missing too many tackles, or they're not getting enough charge downs. He said, listen, coach, if they had a bit of technique, they wouldn't need to be so fit. They're pretty fit. You've got to get them better technique. So all this data is, and that's part of it too, is to have these, how do you become an expert? You get challenged. So we need to have these challenging, robust conversations to get the honesty and the perfection out of our players. When the coach picks his staff, he's got to make sure that they're singing off the same sheet. Going back to this sports science thing is talk to them about their objective data, but how do they relate the observational side of things, and how do they interpret the data? Because there's definitely again, I'll give you a little quote. I'm sorry to be so vocal about it. Boyle, I don't mean to be a bullshit artist here, but I've been coaching for 42 years. I can walk into a room and I know they're not happy. I can see their faces. I know their body language. He said, and I know when they're fat. I know when they're not fit. So I don't need books and things like that there. I just want to keep it simple for them. So, they want to play football. That's all they want to know about. I don't care about these DEXA scans and things like that. That I just want them to play what's going to make them a better footballer. And again, we've been trying to get our athletes bigger, stronger, and faster, but is that going to make them a better athlete for their position? And the answer is definitely no. So they're the sort of things that I think, with qualitative research, you're going to get better answers with them. And it might only be a questionnaire to the coaches or something like that. Like I don't know, but it definitely is a different system in the States than it is in Australia. Although we do have quite a few people in the MBA over there as high performance managers and sports scientists working in the States.
Hey, Pat, I'll ask you a question. And David brought up a great point. He talked about the player not having great technique. So, Pat, in your experiences, how a lot of times in American football, if you have a bad coach that has a bad group of players, the strength coach gets blamed because they're bullshit. So, in your experiences, when you've had to deal with a coach that was not a particularly good coach and he's trying to point the finger at you, how was some of that dialogue without just becoming a blame session?
That's a very good question. Fortunately, I spent my career, majority of my career, with a Hall of Fame coach, and who looked at himself first and pointed the finger at himself first, and challenged people around him. But there were some other head coaches that my staff had to deal with that I got to see that, and so my job was to help them navigate that situation with those coaches. And insecurities, lack of competence, they can project those onto other people, and the strength coach, unfortunately, is an easy target. People know that the strength coach, especially in the United States and in the sport of football, that they're one of the first hired, and the coaches always say, "Oh, this is one of the most important people on staff." Well, I believe that's true, but I spent majority of my career working in this profession. For someone that has a coach, this is a tough one, because I believe I was on a phone earlier today talking about a coach who's very experienced in their sport, but yet needs opportunity to continue to develop, and the people that are around are feeling some pressure from that steep learning curve of the coaching staff, and so that it takes some maturity from people around the program to help guide. And maybe an intervention is needed at some point by someone of influence to say, "Hey, let's pause, let's reflect, let's have conversations, let's communicate, let's get back to collaboration, and not point fingers, but to see what the problem truly is, and then how can we work together." That's easier said than done. So,
some great points there, Pat.
It's easier said than done. But just getting back to the research, David, and Ted and Ernie, I think that if we had more qualitative research and mixed methods research, and my dissertation was qualitative, I think some of that information it may relate to coaches better rather than some of the quantitative. And you're right, a lot of the research we've done is quantitative, because that's how you can get grant funding and research dollars, and there's not as much on the qualitative side. But maybe what can help sport more than what is how it's being helped now is quantitative and mixed methods, and maybe coaches would be more open to hearing about themes and hearing about seeing some quotes rather than seeing some of the numbers that we're really fascinated with currently. That's just a thought and a hint.
Well, I think, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think even on this podcast, or even with my job interview with you, I think you had asked me a question and said, you know, if you're going to go and meet with a head coach and you're going to show up and you're expected to communicate, like, what does your dashboard, or how would you do that? And I said simple, like, I'm not going to bring a dashboard. I'm going to sit down and have a conversation. That conversation is qualitative. You're using objective information to inform the conversation. But in a lot of my experiences, I've found that sometimes sitting down and having a conversation is more effective than showing someone a dashboard or sending out a report every day. If there's an issue that you see and there's coaches or staff who trust you, then go and have a concise conversation with someone and let them know what you're seeing, what you think needs to be done, and then allow others to help make that decision. But that in my mind is a lot more efficient and effective than simply going, here's a dashboard, here's your daily report, and expecting them to understand what it is they're looking at to the same depth that you see and understand data. So I point taken, clue accepted. But yeah, I think that there's a ton of value in that.
And that hint I was dropping was because I believe we're all leaders in our profession, and there are people that listen to what we say, and I think this conversation can have some influence in our profession. That's what I believe. So that's what I was getting to. It wasn't.
No, I think that come across, Pat, too. Yeah. There's interesting that you did a qualitative dissertation. Yeah.
And it was not easy for my advisor to get that, I guess, to get the other faculty on board with, why are we doing qualitative studies in sport? But he was a coach for 30 years. So he was a professor, but he was also a coach. So he understood the value of having sitting down with someone and getting that rich data.
Wow. Yeah, there's hope for me yet, Pat.
I'd be curious to know, like, if you attended a coaches conference, like say American football coaches conference or a volleyball coaches conference, like when coaches are obviously presenting at these, it's not sports scientists or strength conditioning coaches or physios. How much of the content that these coaches are sharing truly is qualitative from their experience? Like, I suppose it actually points out a vulnerability. Like, how many coaches conferences have we actually gone and attended as audience members? I think we tend to go to the conferences that are in a similar field as us, but then we do interface with coaches. Be curious to know how they talk to each other in those professional development settings, because I think there could be a lot gained from that, from a qualitative standpoint.
Yeah, interesting. It opens up another field, doesn't it? Yeah.
Now, there was the longtime basketball announcer, Billy Packer, used to do, all the NCAA tournaments. He wrote a book. Actually, it was, qualitative research. He interviewed, I think, 10 very successful coaches and asked them all the same questions. The title of the book was "Why They Win."
Wow.
And it was one of these I just stumbled across, but it's just like that type of reading or research. And obviously he just turned it into a book. It wasn't technically it was a research project, but I think that stuff's very interesting. Why are these success? Why do they? Why do they win? And I think obviously, what we've just discussed. I think more of that would be beneficial to all people involved in sport.
Ted, you remind me of something something that Coach Gary Pinkel did. It was after a year that he didn't have the success he wanted to have. So he sat down with the staff. I think they came up with about 10 different questions, and they were supposed to go and talk to the top 10 teams if they could get to them, the top 10 teams at the AFCA conference. They were supposed to sit down with the coach, and I think maybe it was like top 13. That's probably how it came out to be. But when we came back from the AFCA conference, each coach reported out, and this was before I was thinking about research or anything like that, but it was some very, very rich data that asked some specific questions to go into detail on what they thought was the main factors towards their success. And I remember player coach relationships came back as like something that everyone in the top 10 or 13 said. Like they really worked really hard on player coach relationships. And man, I wish I had the thought to collect that information, because how valuable would it be to be able to to produce that. Yeah. Ernie, do you have a question? I know you've got something on your mind.
I do. I do have a question. I mean, you never know where these conversations go in these podcasts. And it seems like we're making a pretty strong case for the value of qualitative research in the sports sciences, strength conditioning, nutrition, etc. Earlier, David, you mentioned an application that you have used to facilitate the qualitative research process to try to identify themes and whatnot. And I believe you said it was in vivo.
Yeah.
So for the technical sports scientists out there who want to get their hands dirty with some type of new technology or software, could you tell us a little bit about that software and exactly what it does?
Yeah, so it collects nodes. It's a minefield. And to be quite honest, I was just looking at the transcripts and I thought, you know what? I've got to look at these different strong themes, trust, respect, honesty, emotional intelligence, and then start framing things around that and put them all in together. And then because I'm more au fait with spreadsheets, I started just looking at these paragraphs, cutting them out and putting them into a spreadsheet. So I had my 14 coaches up there, and I had the 14 coaches down on the axis, on the y-axis and the x-axis, had the questions. And so I was just putting them all in there into a big matrix. And from that, I started looking at the data a lot clearer than trying to use the software. And that's how it worked for me. And that's how I had to present it to the SharePoint at Edith Cowan University. Yeah.
David, I've got a question. Can you talk about the 3 levels of certification with the Australian Strength and Conditioning Organization?
The 3 levels, the
coaching
elite level or
certifications.
master's level. Yeah. So we start off with a level 1. So we categorize that as local coaching and divisional coaching. And then we go to the level 2 So the level 2, you've got 3 stages of the level 2, coach 2. You can become a professional coach where you don't have to have a degree. And then when you go up to elite coaching, you have to have an undergraduate degree. And then we go to a level 3, elite, and then a master's qualification. The master's, you've got to have 10,000 hours as a professional coach, and every 2 years you've got to have CECs, that continue education credits, and then you also have to do the level 3. And the level 3 is a workbook on different modules on how you interpret strength, your philosophy, and then we have groups of other coaches there. We've got one next week, a level 3 course. So you've got other coaches, and then we get master coaches that lecture to them, and then they've got to write a workbook on energy systems, on periodization, on coaching, on leadership, and all these. So there's another, like a thesis sort of thing, that's not marked as a thesis, but just what their philosophy was prior to the course, what they learned from the module, and what they're going to take home. So it's putting information back into the ASCA and developing coaches and leaderships, and it's quite comprehensive, and I think we've been very fortunate. And what our RTO, our registered training organisation, is Sport Integrity Australia, which was the old Australian Institute of Sport. So they're our governing body, and we've got that affiliate. So we've got to have scope of practice and guidelines that are going to be associated with Sport Australia.
So, David, for our listeners, we always get your opinion on what would be a couple books that you would recommend to our listeners.
You know what, Ted? I loved Tuesdays with Maury.
Okay.
The book about Mitch Albanrode, the famous sports writer, and I was pretty impressed with The Way of the Warrior. It was another book, and Lance Armstrong's books. You know, I don't care about his what all the implications he had. They were just interesting books about you don't become a world champion and just have luck all the time. You've got to work hard. Yeah, so they were my books that come to mind pretty close.
Well, David, this time has gone by fast, and we have to bring it to a close. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you? I don't know how much you're on social media, but is there an email address or any place they can look?
David Wayne Boyle at Hotmail is my personal email address, or you can look me up on LinkedIn. And I think my Instagram's just David Wayne Boyle.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure getting to meet you. I can't wait to one day get down under. And I don't know how my accent was, but I appreciate you being on the show.
You're great, man. I've been to the States a lot, and I love the place, and I can't wait to get back there too.
All right.
And it's great meeting you, Ernie, Pat, and Ted, and I hope that we do cross paths again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.